On the 13th day since the conflict began in the Middle East, the impact is being felt far beyond the countries directly involved. Now, economically, it's also affecting nations that share key oil routes with the region. For more on the impact of the conflict on Korea, we turn to our correspondent Park Junan here in the studio. Welcome back, Junan.
It's good to be back, Tammy.
So, Junan, where do we start?
Well, today I would like to introduce efforts both at home and abroad to address oil supply concerns. While countries are considering various options, including oil reserve releases by major economies, and here, a temporary domestic fuel price cap to better manage energy market implications. Now, let's take a look at the latest report. South Korea plans to release 22.46 million barrels of oil from its strategic reserves as part of a coordinated action by member countries of the International Energy Agency aimed at stabilizing global energy markets. The plan was announced on Wednesday by the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Resources shortly after the 32 member nations of the Paris-based agency unanimously agreed to carry out the largest collective oil stock release in the organization's history. In total, about 400 million barrels of oil will be made available to the market in an effort to ease supply disruptions and curb rising crude prices linked to the ongoing war involving the United States and Israel against Iran. Korea's contribution represents about 5.6% of the total to be released. The size of each country's release is calculated based on its share of overall oil consumption among IEA members. The U.S. Energy Department also issued a press release saying the administration would release 172 million barrels of oil from its reserves. Officials say the timing and detailed schedule of the coordinated release will be determined in the coming days. The decision comes as global oil markets continue to show volatility despite expectations of increased supply. Oil prices surged for a second consecutive day. On Wednesday, Brent crude rose 4.8% to around $92 per barrel on the Intercontinental Exchange in London. As of Thursday, 3:30 p.m. Korean Standard Time, it is trading at about $98.2, up 6.75% in just a few hours. WTI crude also climbed 4.6% to settle at around $87 per barrel on the New York Mercantile Exchange. And as of the same time on Thursday, it had risen to over $93, gaining more than 6.6%. As oil supply chain risks persist and oil prices continue to climb, the government announced planned market stabilization measures. The first possibility is a supplementary budget dedicated to those who are highly vulnerable to oil price hikes. If introduced, an additional budget of up to 15 to 20 trillion won, or around $10 to $13.5 billion could be allocated. The funding could be used to expand the scope of fuel tax reductions, provide oil price-linked support for low-income workers, expand energy voucher assistance, offer subsidies for the transportation industry, including trucks and buses, and support export-oriented small and medium-sized enterprises. A temporary price cap on domestic oil is another option the government will announce. According to its own guidelines, appropriate price levels that the government thinks ideal would be at 1,800 won per liter or around $1.22. However, the price level would be reviewed every 2 weeks to reflect any changes in global oil prices. With more details to follow, Finance Minister Koo Yoon-chul said the government will mobilize all available policy tools and activate an emergency economic response system to address the situation in real time.
And Junan, before we came on air, we just learned that the government is implementing a temporary price fuel cap system from tomorrow, right? Tell us more.
Right, Tammy. So this is a big deal because starting tomorrow, which is Friday Korean Standard Time, a domestic oil price cap will be implemented for the first time in nearly 30 years since oil price liberalization in 1997. Reports indicate the cap will primarily apply at the refinery wholesale level, rather than placing direct pressure on the individual gas stations. This helps maintain fairness across the supply chain by curbing upstream price increases, while the government may provide support or subsidies to refiners if needed to offset costs, though the exact details are still being finalized.
Well, one thing's for sure, the government appears strongly committed to stabilizing oil prices. Now, Chuna, why such a strong emphasis on this issue?
It's because South Korea is very vulnerable against oil shocks. Well, we import virtually 100% of our crude oil with no domestic production. And in fact, about 70% of those imports pass through the Strait of Hormuz, a single choke point that is now disrupted by the conflict. As of the first quarter of 2025, Korea accounts for 12% of total oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz by destination, making the country the third most exposed nation globally. And now let's take a listen to the reason why supply road disruption is a major concern for the country's economy.
Directly, consumers feel the impact through higher fuel prices. For producers, it means rising production costs, but it also creates difficulties in shipping their goods for export. They may end up stockpiling products because they cannot ship them out, as shipping costs rise and vessels become harder to secure.
This can spike consumer prices, slow GDP growth, and increase financial volatility. That's why stabilizing the domestic fuel supply is necessary.
Indeed, hopefully the temporary fuel price cap system will help and ease the burden on the lives of the people. Junan, thanks for the coverage tonight.
Thank you.